on how a manufacturer gains 91 days of productivity by pushing backups to AWS and Rubrik. Just a few housekeeping items as we get started. When you join today's webinar, you selected to join by either phone call or your computer audio. If for any reason you would like to change your audio selection, you can do so by accessing your audio pane in the control panel. From this control panel, you will also have the opportunity to submit questions to today's presenters by typing your questions into the questions panel. We will collect the questions and address as many as we can during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. Also, at the end of today's event is a brief survey. Please stay connected until the end of the broadcast and submit your feedback as your opinions count. Lastly, the PowerPoint presentation will be available through SlideShare along with a recording of the webinar on YouTube. You will be notified via an email that will be sent 2 to 3 days after the conclusion of the event. So keep an eye out for the follow-up email sent to address that you provided. Again, welcome to today's live webinar on how a manufacturer gains 91 days of productivity by pushing backups to AWS. My name is Girish Chanchlani. I'm a Partner Solutions Architect for Amazon Web Services, and I will be your host and moderator for today's webinar. Today, you will learn about storage on AWS, learn more about Rubrik's data management solution, and see how Adelaide Brighton moved away from using a legacy tape-based backup solution to a modern cloud-based one with AWS and Rubrik, and the benefits that they observed firsthand. In addition to learning about AWS, we will also hear from Bill Gerling, who is a technical product manager at Rubrik, and Craig Beato, who is a systems administrator at Adelaide Brighton. And remember, please post your questions in the chat box throughout this presentation, as we will review questions at the end of today's presentation. With that, let's start off by looking at what AWS offers today in the storage space. Looking at our global infrastructure here, so Amazon Cloud Computing resources are hosted in multiple locations worldwide. These locations are composed of AWS regions and availability zones. Each AWS region is a separate geographic area, and each AWS region has multiple isolated locations known as availability zones. An easy way to think about an availability zone, or also called as an AZ, is to think of it as a data center. Each availability zone is composed of one or more buildings, and these availability zones within a region are separated from each other by a meaningful distance and protected against joint failures for maximum resiliency. At present, we have 24 regions spread out across the world and a total of 76 availability zones within those regions. We recently added 2 new regions, one in South Africa, Cape Town, and another in Milan, Italy. In addition to this, we have announced 3 additional regions and 9 availability zones that will be coming online in the near future. So when we look at storage solutions on AWS, we think of 3 main components. Core to this is the AWS services. This includes storage services as well as other services like compute. AWS today offers more than 175 unique services, and these offer customers scalability, durability, elasticity, and cloud economics to meet the needs of their workloads. In addition to what AWS services offer, AWS technology partners such as Rubrik integrate their existing on-prem and cloud-based solutions to use the AWS services and add capabilities to protect and manage on-prem as well as cloud-based workloads. Lastly, there is the consulting partners that understand AWS services and technology solutions from partners and combine these to help customers meet their business needs. So for example, in a specific domain such as the education or the healthcare sector. So in terms of AWS storage services, we have a wide variety of storage services, and here is just a representation of the various categories, including file, block, and object, and the key services under those categories. So under file services category, we have Amazon EFS and Amazon FSX. Under block, we have Amazon EBS, that is network attached block storage, and Amazon EC2 instance store, that is temporary local storage available with specific instance families. For backup solutions, some of the most popular storage services are the object services like Amazon Simple Storage Service or S3, and various storage classes under that, such as S3 Glacier or Glacier Deep Archive Service. In addition to the storage services, AWS also offers a wide variety of data transfer services that help customers move large amounts of data to AWS in an efficient and cost-effective manner. This category of services includes AWS Direct Connect, that gives customers a dedicated bandwidth from their data centers to AWS, and services like AWS Snowball that give customers the option of moving their data out of band by passing their network on ruggedized storage devices that AWS ships to their data centers, and then customers can just copy the data and send it over to us at AWS, where we copy the data into Amazon S3. In terms of Amazon S3 storage classes, these are categorized based on the frequency of access, starting from storing the most active data on standard S3 to storing infrequently accessed data on tiers such as standard infrequent access or S3IA and Glacier or Glacier Deep Archive. For each of these storage classes, we keep 3 copies of data across multiple availability zones for maximum durability and resiliency. So if you compare this to an on-premise world, from a backup and recovery perspective, what we offer is the equivalent of creating 3 separate copies. One slight exception to this is S3 one zone storage class, where we still keep 3 copies of data, but they are kept within a single AZ, and hence the name one zone. So you don't get the benefit of multiple AZs with that class. So Rubrik today supports S3 standard, S3 infrequent access, and S3 Glacier as storage tiers for backups. Let's look at what customers generally see as backup and recovery challenges from an on-premise backup point of view. So first, the underlying infrastructure is difficult to manage. You have to think in terms of servers, virtualization platforms, storage, the various storage protocols, offerings from various storage vendors, and peculiarity of each and every vendor, and so on. And there are a lot of manual aspects to managing the infrastructure. And if we look at scaling the storage solution, especially when customers need to add disk or tape capacity, or even cloud capacity, or even compute capacity, this is extremely difficult and time-consuming. It is also very costly. On-premise systems usually eat into capital expenses, in addition to yearly maintenance costs and hardware and software upgrade costs, training costs, and so on. We also see more and more customers that need to meet compliance regulations that get tied with long-term data storage. So for example, GDPR, HIPAA in healthcare, and others that are harder to achieve with traditional backup and recovery solutions. So what are some of the benefits that AWS offers from an infrastructure standpoint for backup and recovery solutions? For one, it is an integrated platform. You have various storage classes available as different services under one roof. It also provides a highly secure environment with multiple options available from AWS and AWS partners for encrypting data at rest and in motion, for tighter access control, and various other security solutions. It is very easy to maintain compared to an on-premise storage solution. Interface is simple, globally available over the internet. Customers can just go to the AWS console and create a bucket in the region of choice and start using that. There is no need to know the details behind how the data is actually stored, which is all managed by us. And it needs no maintenance or frequent hardware and software upgrades. It can also automatically scale up in terms of capacity and performance based on your business needs. So for example, Amazon S3 offers virtually unlimited capacity. So if your data grows, Amazon S3 scales automatically, and there is nothing that customers need to do there. It also has an OpEx model where you only pay for what you use. So there are no upfront costs, no yearly maintenance costs, no upgrade costs, and so on. You do not have to pre-purchase storage in anticipation that it will be used. You only use what you need and you only pay for that. So for our customers to meet their compliance needs, we have various certifications and assurance programs that we work with. And this slide highlights the key ones here. We have over 200 compliance, governance, and security certifications. Some prominent examples you can see here are ISO 27017, that is a standard for security controls for cloud services. ISO 27018, that deals with cloud privacy. Certifications like SOC 1, SOC 2, and SOC 3. And the customers could be HIPAA and PCI compliant, as well as GDPR compliant on the AWS platform. With that, I will hand it over to Bill, who will walk us through Rubrik's cloud data management solution.
Thanks, Girish. Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining. My name is Bill Gerling. I'm a technical product manager here at Rubrik. I've been on board for about 2 years, and prior to coming on board, I worked in a consultancy that did cloud migrations and things of that nature. Appreciate you taking the time to listen today. Before we begin, why Rubrik is where we like to start. Data protection as a whole is an industry that has been somewhat stagnant until late. Many of the solutions in the marketplace come from a time when tape libraries were attached directly to physical hosts in order to protect them. And things sort of organically evolved from there with various components being bolted on or merged through acquisition in order to sort of modernize these data protection solutions for the various eras that have come since their initial implementation. And so you can see things like initially backup to tape was a very common approach. Then backup to disk became more common, and so another appliance was brought in to dump the backups to disk. Gateways to talk to cloud storage, proxies, dedupe appliances, so on and so forth. All of these components are independently managed, independently lifecycled, patched. From an API perspective, they tend to have autonomous and independent APIs. Sometimes the APIs are a bolt-on. And so what we saw as a company when we began to design our product for the market was that these traditional data protection architectures were sort of anti-patterns to things like adopting public cloud or undergoing an initiative focused on automating the provisioning and lifecycle of an application, as well as efforts around security, having to independently manage and patch and harden each of these individual components can be quite cumbersome and can lead to mistakes, and mistakes are quite troublesome when it comes to security. And so we see these sort of legacy data protection solutions as an anti-pattern to all of these efforts, and all of these efforts are what most modern businesses are sort of striving towards in terms of their strategic initiatives. So Rubrik came to market with sort of a cloud-first mentality. We wanted to simplify data protection. We wanted to enable automation. We wanted to enable cloud consumption. And we wanted to provide a secure and simple architecture that allowed our customers to stop worrying about having to have data protection, and instead to empower those customers to utilize their data protection assets for more than just operational backup and recovery. So what is it? How do we work, right? First and foremost, we're very simple to deploy and simple to set up. On premises, we're a clustered architecture. We've got a SaaS solution. We've got virtual clusters that run in AWS as well. And essentially what you do is you deploy the solution, and then you point us at the workloads that you want to protect. And these can be virtual machines, they can be databases, they can be in the data center, they can be at the edge, they can be on the cloud. And what we'll do is we'll automatically discover the workloads that you're targeting, and we'll allow you to very rapidly protect those things through our SLA domain policy engine. I like to describe the SLA policy as sort of a declarative approach to data protection. What it offers you the ability to do is just define frequency, retention, and location for the things that you're protecting. And Rubrik will handle all of the logistics of getting you from point A to point B. I like to kind of call it like CloudFormation for data protection. You define desired state and tell us the scope of that protection, and we'll handle all the nuances of scheduling jobs, of garbage collection, so on and so forth. No need for individual job management with our solution. In terms of AWS, one of the cornerstone capabilities of our product from V1 of the product was long-term retention archival to S3 on AWS. We're in the business of selling software, empowering our customers to do more with their data protection assets. We're not in the business of storing data on an appliance somewhere. And so V1 of Rubrik offered the option for long-term retention on S3. Since then, we've iterated and expanded support for other classes of S3, support for Glacier, support for tiering between S3 and S3IA, so on and so forth. All of the metadata for every piece of data that we store is co-located in the archive and is encrypted. And so we offer up the ability to do sort of this Google-like predictive search when protecting and recovering workloads, and that extends to the archive. So all of the data stored in the archive is cataloged, searchable, and recoverable, just as it is when it's on premises on an appliance or running on a virtual cluster somewhere inside of AWS. It's transparent to the end customer in terms of whether or not their data resides on a Rubrik cluster somewhere or in an archive in S3. And then on-demand VM and file level recovery on AWS, out of AWS. This capability allows you to do things like instantly recovering file data, SQL data, virtual machines within and into AWS from on-prem, so on and so forth. And then sort of table stake stuff, right? Security and encryption. So end-to-end encryption, both at rest and in transit. Immutable file system. So we're an append-only file system. We're not an open file system. There's no NFS targets that you can connect directly to or anything like that. And all of our data is stored in a format where it's append-only. So think like an object chain type of approach, which means that that ransomware is not going to be able to encrypt your backups. For instance, if you were in a scenario where you were target of a ransomware attack and they were looking to stop your recovery efforts. AI and ML driven ransomware recovery. So this is a product that we have known as Radar that essentially operates on your backup metadata and looks for anomalous change patterns in that data set, and then prompts you sort of for the blast radius and time that we think some sort of event may have taken place. And then we'll offer you the option to sort of intelligently roll back all of the affected assets to a known good point in time. So let's talk about some of the offerings that we have in terms of AWS and where our integration points are with the AWS storage services. First and foremost, I mentioned Cloud Out, which services the Cloud Archive long-term retention use case. This is essentially the ability for us to protect assets that are on premises and to use S3 or Glacier as a long-term retention target. These assets could be virtual machines as indicated here, could be NAS data, could be file systems or databases, what have you, any data set that you seek to protect, whether it's on-prem in the data center, whether it's at the edge, whether it resides in AWS already. We can protect that data set and we can store the long-term retention assets of that data set in S3. And again, fully searchable, fully recoverable, no need for gateways, incremental forever up into S3. So really just trying to make S3 look transparent and give you the same look and feel as if the data was at your fingertips locally. In addition to that, if you're protecting VM assets on-prem, we offer you the ability to use Rubrik to kind of do like a managed lift and shift into AWS. So if you're protecting, say, vSphere VM on premises, you're already doing this cloud archive workflow in order to keep costs low and make sure that you have a resilient repository to store your data in. We can then piggyback off of that cloud archive functionality. And if you're storing VMs in that archive, we can launch transient compute instances in a VPC in your AWS environment, and we can actually convert these on-premises virtual machines into images in AWS and ultimately launch them as instances running in EC2. This can be really, really useful for something like test dev, where you might be doing that in AWS and you want a copy of a VM that was running on-prem. You're already backing that VM up. You're already storing those backups in S3. Now we just offer you the ability to launch that into AWS using either our API or our user interface. And then once it's running in AWS, it's no different from any other instance running up there. So it uses EBS storage, it's launched from an AMI. These things can be pre-converted, and those AMIs can be at your fingertips and ready for rapid launch and utilization as you see fit. And then sort of coming full circle here, closing the loop, as it were, reprotecting assets that live inside of AWS as well. So we like to see ourselves as a holistic solution, regardless of where your data lives or what format it takes. We want to be able to protect it for you, and we want to offer up the ability for you to report on your data protection activity, for you to verify compliance with whatever frameworks govern how you back up and recover data. And so what we offer here is the ability to protect data that resides inside of EC2. We can essentially orchestrate the creation of Amazon machine images inside of your environment and of EBS snapshots. These use the same policy construct that you would use if you were protecting, say, assets on-prem. Same policy set, actually, as well. So those policies are portable sort of across environments. And all of the backups are stored inside of your environment and are stored in AWS native formats as CBS snapshots and as AMIs. And we can apply the policies inside of AWS using rules that are based upon tag values. We can apply and auto protect everything within a specific account within specific regions. You can apply volume or protect volumes or instances individually. And so if you're already provisioning assets into AWS and tagging those assets as you should be for the purposes of governance, then we fit right into that model, and you can apply our SLAs right on top of your existing governance framework. And then report on all of this, your hybrid cloud environment as you're moving to AWS from a single control plane within Polaris. So let's dig into each of these use cases a little bit more and just talk about some of the nuances of how they're implemented. First and foremost, Cloud Out, right? Cloud Archive in S3 and Glacier. Again, this has been part of Rubrik since V1 of the product. So the initial release when we came out of stealth was essentially protecting data center assets, long-term retention in S3. No storage gateways, incremental forever approach here. We've, since the inception of this feature set, built out some pretty cool capabilities that allow us to do the incremental forever thing, that allow us to have second clusters attached to these archives and recover out of these archives in the event that you lose your primary cluster, so on and so forth. And so really the two key principles in terms of our Cloud Archive use case and in terms of Cloud Out in general are that we want to be a good steward of your data and your bandwidth. So we want to transmit as little as possible over your WAN links or over Direct Connect up into S3. And if you're recovering, we want to recover as little as possible out of S3 so that you're not egressing a bunch of data back on-prem in a recovery scenario. And in order to do that, we've written a pretty intelligent file system that's aware of the data and the metadata in S3, and that allows us to do things like single file fetches out of S3 using ranged reads if you're just recovering a single file. And again, all of this is transparent to you as a customer within the Rubrik console. Literally, the only thing that indicates that your data is not local in the data center is a little cloud icon next to the snapshot that you want to recover. We dedupe and compress before we transmit. So all of the backups stored in S3 are incremental forever and are compressed prior to transmission. And then we're only transmitting those changes each time we take a snapshot. As stated before, all of the indexes and metadata associated with the objects that are stored in S3 are co-located with them, which means that you've got the ability to do things like single file search and recovery, regardless of whether or not the data is local or in S3. Everything is encrypted before we transmit, so we support static RSA encryption, or you can use KMS to encrypt, and we'll encrypt the blocks before they're transmitted to S3. And again, in a recovery scenario, we're moving only the blocks that need to be moved in order to facilitate recovery of the assets that you're trying to recover, thus minimizing costs and speeding recovery times as best possible given the scenario. NAS Direct Archive is an interesting use case that's come to light recently. We noticed that many of our customers were protecting large NAS data sets on-prem, and that they had the desire to store those protected assets inside of S3 for long-term retention. But they didn't really have the desire for a local copy for immediate operational recovery. And local storage can be somewhat expensive, and the ask tended to come up quite often. Hey, can we bypass any sort of local retention and instead just stream these backups straight to S3? And with NAS Direct Archive, we offer up that functionality. And then we've kind of piggybacked on top of that use case and actually offered Snap integration with some of the more common NAS platforms out there. So we have API integrated incremental backups of Isilon, of FlashBlade, and of NetApp. And that allows us to very rapidly ascertain the changes in the data set that we're ingesting using the native APIs on the platforms that we're ingesting the data off of, and then to rapidly stream those changes out to S3 for long-term retention. So let's talk about the Cloud On use case a little bit. There's a few use cases here where Cloud On becomes a valuable asset. First and foremost, remember that you're probably already transmitting your data to S3 to begin with, right? You're taking that long-term retention data, you're sticking it in S3 because you don't want to stick it in tape on-prem. You don't want to stick it on block storage on-prem because that's expensive. And you're never going to do it as well as Amazon is doing it. You're never going to be as scalable. You're never going to be as resilient, not unless you're a hyperscaler like they are. And so what we find is that the vast majority of our customers come to us and say, look, Rubrik, I like the way you're doing data protection. I want most of my data to reside in S3 from a long-term retention perspective. So let's go ahead and implement that architecture. Very, very common architecture for us, probably the most common architecture in terms of long-term retention. What Cloud On offers us the ability to do is if you're protecting virtual machines on premises and archiving those virtual machines to S3, we can use worker instances inside of AWS to incrementally convert those on-prem VM formats into AMIs and EBS snapshots that can be used to launch instances into EC2 on AWS. And this can be done either automatically each time a backup is taken, or it can be done sort of on demand in an ad hoc manner. And we've seen customers really, really embrace this functionality because it's got a couple of benefits. First and foremost, you don't need a dedicated replication plane to do this. You're already writing this data out to S3 because you're already backing it up and you need a copy in S3 for either long-term retention or for your +1 copy of the on-prem data. And so that data is already getting transmitted to the S3 one time, and it's already there for a purpose. Well, Cloud On allows you to take that data that you would be storing anyway and to convert and launch on-prem virtual machines into EC2 utilizing that data. No need for retransmission, and as of late, incremental in nature, which greatly lowers RPO and RTO if you're using this instantiation capability as part of some sort of DR strategy or migration strategy or something like that. And so essentially the way the workflow works is you archive with Cloud Out, the data lands in S3, and then either on demand or in an automated fashion, we go ahead and run that conversion for you, ultimately leaving you with an image and some snapshots that are ready to launch as an EC2 instance. Very, very popular for test dev, especially with some of the automation workflows that we can facilitate through our API, and also useful as part of a migration strategy or as part of a DR effort. Protecting AWS assets, there's a couple of ways we can do this. So one way that we can do it is we can use a Rubrik cluster to facilitate this process. Another mechanism that we can offer up this capability through is our SaaS platform, which is known as Polaris. And essentially what it allows us to do is it allows us to take the SLA policy construct that I described earlier, this declarative document that sort of defines frequency and retention, replication parameters, so on and so forth. And it allows us to apply those SLA policies to EC2 instances or to EBS volumes. And recently announced, not covered in detail in this webinar, but to RDS instances as well. And upon application of those policy documents to your assets, whether it be assigning a policy directly to an instance or assigning a policy to a tag pair and having that tag pair mapped down to the instance, what we'll do behind the scenes is we'll enforce that policy by means of creating Amazon machine images and EBS snapshots. We can index these snapshots and offer single file search and recovery in any regions where AWS EKS is supported. And essentially what you get is you kind of get the best of both worlds, is what I like to call it. You get the Rubrik SLA policy model. You get our single control plane for all of your data protection activities, whether you're protecting on-prem assets or assets that reside in the Amazon cloud. And you get those assets stored in a native AWS format. So when we back up an EC2 instance, that backup is an Amazon machine image and one or more EBS snapshots that underpin the original source instance. When we replicate those backups to another region, we just replicate the Amazon machine image and the EBS snapshots. And so you have the added benefit here of not only having the richness of our policy model and sort of the dynamic, multi-account approach to applying these policies that we offer up, but you also get backups that are stored in a format that is native to AWS. So if for some reason in the future you're not using Rubrik or you need to circumvent Rubrik for some reason, you're not locked out of those backups. Those are native snapshots. Those are native images that you can utilize as you see fit. Virtual clusters. So we have a cloud cluster that you can run in AWS as well. This offers up some interesting capabilities that the cloud native protection approach that I mentioned prior does not. Most importantly, the ability to do application consistent backups of things like Microsoft SQL databases and Oracle databases, and to instantly recover those backups back into their source instances in the event of a failure or recovery scenario, as well as the ability to do cloud out, right? So archiving to S3, S3IA, or Glacier. And these virtual clusters, aside from the fact that they run on EC2 instances, are identical to the software that you would be running on some sort of appliance or instance inside of a data center. And then you lay Polaris on top of these, and you've got a single control plane and an identical look and feel for data protection activities, whether these are AWS assets or vSphere assets that you're about to move into AWS or somewhere in between. So really the goal here is simplicity, ease of automation, consistent user experience across platforms, across environments. And with that, I will hand it over to Craig from Adelaide Brighton, who is going to tell you guys about their Rubrik experience. Craig, are you out there?
Yes, I am. Thanks, Bill.
Yep.
Hope everyone's safe and well this morning. As Bill said, I'm Craig Baedo. I'm a systems administrator for Adelaide Brighton Cement. It's a brisk 6 o'clock in the morning in Adelaide, so I might sound a little dazed. So Adelaide Brighton, we're Australia's largest manufacturer of cement and lime. We have downstream businesses as well in concrete, quarrying and masonry products. Our customer base ranges from major mining and infrastructure projects down to residential concrete and pavers. We currently have over 1,500 staff, over 140 sites, and we're located in every state and territory in Australia. In my role, I've been responsible for the deployment of both Rubrik and AWS environments, and they're two of the technologies that Adelaide Brighton's most benefited from over the last couple of years. Yes. So what did our backups look like before? We were managing a lot of data on tape, and that was no one's favorite job. No one likes going load a tape drive. Our backup administration was taking a significant amount of time. And a lot of this time was being done by external consultants. Also, our daily backup window was normally around 16 hours, meaning many of our nightly backups were running well into production hours the next day. So what were we going to do about it? We had a few high-level goals for our backup project. Firstly, tape drive had to go. We wanted to reduce the amount of manual work by moving to a more modern approach to our backup and DR. And we wanted to take our first steps into public cloud, and we saw this as a good starting point. So in 2016, South Australia had a statewide blackout. It made international news. It was huge. Adelaide Brighton is a national company, but both our data centres were in Adelaide due to reliance on very low latency for some of our technologies. Luckily for us, our data center had a large diesel supply, so somehow our data center stayed up, as did our interstate data links. So once power was restored around 8 hours later, somehow we were unscathed. But questions started to get asked by our management team. In our next data center project, we had to look at having a DR site outside of South Australia. And our solution to this was Rubrik's Cloud On and AWS. So why did we choose Rubrik? Firstly, Rubrik's amazingly easy to use. It deduplicates your data, both on site, and it consolidated the data we were keeping in S3 as well, which keeps our storage costs down. They have a fantastic support team. As a public company, we're subject to yearly audits, and we can easily produce the compliance information that we need. On ransomware, our project came along just after the WannaCry ransomware. And we could see the benefits of features like Rubrik's immutable file system and their live mount recovery to recover from ransomware attacks. And as Bill said before, they integrate natively into cloud systems. So there was no virtual tape libraries or storage gateways or any other kind of middle tier into cloud. So this is the solution we came up with. We put Rubrik bricks in both of our data centers. Our backup data is being replicated between these two data centers over dark fiber. We're archiving our backups out to AWS S3 storage. S3 is a public service by default, so we're using S3 endpoint to privately send our backup data down our AWS Direct Connect. And we're using AWS's key management service to encrypt our backup data at rest in S3. Also making use of Rubrik's Cloud On, so we can fire up those backups in S3 using AWS EC2 instances in case of a DR. So this is what our design ended up looking like. You can see our two primary data centers on the left and the backup replication happening between them. You can see our archive data goes down our MPLS links and over our Direct Connect into the AWS Sydney region. That terminates on a VPC endpoint in our production VPC, which then stores our backup data in our S3 buckets. If we need to do something with those, we can use Rubrik's Cloud On to take that data in S3, convert it into AMIs, and then fire up EC2 instances. All right, so how did this all pan out for us? We cut our management time from 16 hours a week to 2, and we're no longer using any external consultants. We said 2 hours a week to be conservative, but to be honest, most of the time we don't touch it, or it's 10 minutes a week. So choosing products that save us time is very important to us. I guess like a lot of IT companies, I started 8 years ago. We have hundreds more staff, 50 more sites, a huge amount of extra technology to maintain, and we still have the same amount of IT staff. So we have to find efficiencies. Our backup window is now down to just 2 hours. This means we can take more backups during the day and reduce our RPO. It also means that we're in and out of VMs faster, so we're less likely to impact production workloads. We can make use of the durability and scale of AWS for our archive storage and DR compute. And Rubrik's bricks are very compact and low power. So along with removing our large tape drive, we managed to reduce a full data center rack in both of our data centers, and this was a significant cost saving for us. And Rubrik takes care of all the hardware maintenance and software upgrades. So when it comes time to do something like a firmware upgrade, you just raise a support ticket, open your support tunnel, and they hand it back to you upgraded and tested. So it's very much a managed service. So what's next for Adelaide Brighton? We've continued to expand our AWS workloads and now we'll consume over 40 services. We're using Rubrik's Polaris backup system to natively back up workloads in AWS. We've moved from a completely on-premise environment to now more of a hybrid environment where we cherry pick workloads and run them where it seems most suitable. And we're always looking for new use cases. We currently have projects using EKS, serverless technologies such as Lambda and API Gateway, and we're just starting to test Rubrik's native backup for RDS. So just a few key takeaways from our experience with Rubrik and AWS. So Rubrik and AWS has given us the ability to perform DR in the cloud cost effectively. We're spending a lot less time maintaining our backups, and that's time we can spend on building new solutions. We've realized some significant cost savings by moving to a more modern approach to our backup and DR. We've greatly reduced both our RPO and our RTO. And Rubrik this Rubrik project specifically was a great stepping stone for us into taking advantage of the other services available in AWS. So that's everything from me. So thank you all for your time, and I'll hand over to Girish for Q&A.
Thank you, Craig, and thank you, Bill. All right. So with that, we'll open the floor for questions. Please note that you can submit your questions in the questions panel. All right, so we have a few questions. Let's start off. All right, here it is. I think, so this one is for you, Bill. So can Rubrik protect applications running on physical servers?
Yes, yeah, we do have a connector that we can run on physical servers in the event that you need to protect something that's not virtualized today. That offers up the ability to do things like file or volume level protection, as well as application consistent backups of most of the major database engines. We also have this thing known as a managed volume that essentially allows you to open it up and temporarily dump data to it and then seal it and make it immutable, which can be particularly useful for physical workloads that may not have a dedicated integration on the Rubrik side of the house already today. And then all of that data is subject to all of the same policies and same long-term retention targets that any other data set would be. So entirely possible to back up physical hosts and stick that data in S3 or Glacier for long-term retention.
Perfect. So Bill, the lightweight, the connector that you mentioned, that's more of a lightweight component, right? That gets installed on the physical box. And then from that point onwards, it's essentially, customers will see it in the Rubrik, show up as a source in the Rubrik management console, right? And then they can apply the policies against that. And
that's correct, yes. And that service is automatically updated each time the code is upgraded on the cluster side of the house from a Rubrik perspective. So no real ongoing maintenance in terms of the connector. And then we've got a bunch of offerings out there in terms of integrations to get the thing deployed. So if you're using configuration management tools like Puppet or Chef or Ansible, or if you're into scripting or something like that, our SDKs, our APIs, and our pre-built integrations can all be used to deploy the connector so that you don't need to manually touch each system.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. So here is the next question. So Craig, you mentioned that you guys saw a massive improvement in your RPOs and RTOs with Rubrik's cloud on feature. So can you talk a little bit about the RTOs that you the improvements in RTOs that you saw in your current environment?
Yeah, absolutely. So Rubrik has a technology called live mount. So with from an RTO perspective, if you have a server that is currently stored on a Rubrik brick, you can turn it on and it's on within about 10 seconds. From an AWS perspective, it can convert an AMI pretty quickly. It depends on the size of it, but normally we're talking bringing up a server within sort of 15, 20, 30 minutes.
Perfect. Okay. And you are using the live mount technology basically to maybe spin up a copy of the database without having to do a restore, right? Where you can run any sort of.
Yeah, absolutely. Queries. Yeah, we're using that for both servers and for SQL databases.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. The next question here is for Bill. Bill, can you talk a little bit about your cloud native protection for EC2 and specifically about if you guys support granular recoveries from those backups, for example, restoring individual files and folders and individual objects from there?
Yes, absolutely. So we've got a couple flavors of the cloud native protection. We've got an implementation that's available through a SaaS control plane, and then we've got an implementation that's available through the virtual clusters as well. And essentially, what this feature allows you to do is you can add your AWS accounts for protection. Rubrik will discover the instances and volumes in the regions that you've specified that should be protected. The provisioning process for this is CloudFormation integrated and uses cross-account roles for access into the customer environment. So sort of in line with best practices from a identity and access management perspective there. And once we've discovered the resources in the accounts that you want to protect, we offer you up sort of a single panel where you can see all of these assets iterated together. You can filter them as needed and apply policies to them using whatever method you desire. You could apply a policy to an entire account, and every VM within every region that's protected in that account would inherit that policy unless it was overridden at a more granular level. You can map the policies to tags and to tag values or just to tag keys. And those tag rules can be applicable across accounts. So you could have one policy that covers all production assets across all accounts and just matches based upon, department equals prod or something like that. And then you can assign these policies directly to instances and EBS volumes, which would override both the account level application and the tag-based application of the SLA. So sort of a bastion of last resort for an override there. Once these policies are assigned, we just begin orchestrating the creation of AMIs and EBS snapshots in accordance with the policy that's been assigned. If indexing has been enabled, file system indexing on any of the assets that we're protecting, then we will use EKS workers that spin up and spin down on demand in order to do the indexing. And the customer can then search within the Rubrik console for any files that they might want to recover. We'll search across all snapshots that have been indexed for that asset, give you a list of the files that match and the snapshots that contain those files. And in the event that you want to recover something today, essentially what you can do is select one or more files, one or more folders, and you can choose to recover those into an S3 bucket. So that could be a new S3 bucket that we build on demand for you, or it can be an existing bucket. In addition to the file level recovery into S3, we also offer up the ability to export copies of instances or volumes within or across regions. We offer up the ability to export a volume and replace the existing source volume if it's attached somewhere. And then we offer the ability to roll instances that are running currently back to whatever point in time you've selected. So essentially restore in place, export a copy of either an instance or a volume, as well as file level search and recovery into S3.
Perfect. Thank you, Bill. There is one more question for you, Bill. Can you talk a little bit about RDS instance protection?
Yes, absolutely. So this is a feature that's about to go GA. It was actually announced at our virtual event that we had recently. And essentially, the RDS protection takes the same approach as our EC2 native protection, where you will go ahead and either reuse the policies that you've built for EC2 native already or build new policies. You can assign these policies to RDS instances that you want to protect. What we're actually doing behind the scenes is we're using the AWS backup API, and we create snapshots of the RDS instances in accordance with the SLA that you've defined. We will also configure auto backup for whatever window you define that you want point in time recovery available for. So without going too in depth, out to 35 days, we can offer you the ability to configure point in time recovery through the AWS automatic backups for RDS. And we kind of amalgamate all of that together in our console. So you get the same look and feel that you get with EC2 native protection, where you've got a calendar view, all of the snapshots for the instance that you're inspecting in that calendar view, and then a slider bar that lets you do point in time recovery out to the 35-day window if you've configured that capability. So very, very, very similar to the EC2 native protection. We're intentionally making the look and feel of all of these services that we support nearly identical, so that you've got as little to worry about detail-wise as possible. Build an SLA, assign it to an instance somehow, and we'll take care of the rest.
Perfect. Thank you, Bill. The next question is for Craig. So how did moving your backups to AWS, right, impact your backup strategy? Are you still using weekly fulls? Are you still following the older father, grandfather strategy, or have you moved on to do incremental forever?
Yeah, absolutely. So all of our backups are now incremental forever, and that's how we got such a huge improvement in our backup window. When you're only taking incremental data, you can really shorten your backup times greatly.
Perfect. The next question is the S3 bucket managed by Rubrik or is it managed by the customer? Also, there's a question on the capacity. How is it charged? Is it passed on directly to the customer or is it built into Rubrik cost? So maybe Bill, you can answer this question.
Certainly, yeah. So we like to offer our customers flexibility. So in terms of building the bucket, you can pre-build the bucket. We'll give you the policies that you need in order for us to access it, or you can give us permissions to create the bucket ourselves. And when you go and add the archive location within Rubrik, you just specify region and a bucket name, and we'll go ahead and create the bucket for you. So either or in terms of the first question. I would say the majority of our customers tend to prefer to build their own buckets for whatever reason. There's oftentimes, CI/CD pipelines and stuff that they want to use to build these things, and so that's a-okay to us. If you don't feel like building the bucket, we'll create it for you. The capacity and the billing within the bucket, that data resides in the customer's AWS account. We're not managing the bucket in our account or anything like that for them. And so all of the consumption against S3 would be billed through standard channels to the end customer. It's not baked into our licensing. We don't absorb that cost and pass it along to our customers or anything like that. So whatever capacity is consumed in that bucket would be billed through standard AWS channels to the end customer.
Okay, awesome. The next one is for you as well, Bill. So for the on-prem backup solution, is there a hardware solution, requiring disk capacity for caching before sending to S3? I mean, maybe you want to touch upon the Rubrik brick appliance, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be completely candid. I'm a cloud guy, and I don't play in the data center space all that much anymore. But I do know the answer to this one. So we're a clustered architecture. The initial implementation of our offering was on sort of a white box 2U 4-node appliance that has our bezel on it, but is fairly generic outside of that. We also have an HCL for most of the common server manufacturers that our customers may have standardized on. I'll not call any of them out here, but big names would be things that are familiar to you and likely something that we support. And most of our customers that are protecting workloads on premises are building enough capacity into these clusters for operational recovery out to the 2-week, 30-day, or 60-day mark. So Craig had mentioned this instant recovery capability, this live mount capability. And so generally what we see our customers doing is anything that they're going to want to recover extremely rapidly or near instantaneously within the data center, they will keep some amount of backups local on the cluster in the data center to facilitate that recovery. And so I would say, just super generically speaking, a common use case is a customer protects, say, a vSphere environment or a SQL environment on-prem. They keep 2 weeks or 30 days worth of those backups local to the Rubrik cluster. They instant archive to S3, so they've got a +1 copy, and then they keep out to however many years they've got to persist solely in S3. And so what you end up with is this cost-effective, super scalable, super resilient storage repository in S3, and then you end up with 30 days worth of backups residing on the cluster on-prem. And in the event of a failure or loss of a virtual machine or something, you can live mount those virtual machines or live mount those databases back into their original sources on-prem in the data center. And then in the event of a catastrophic loss of maybe the whole data center, you've still got that archive sitting in S3 that another cluster could read off of and facilitate recovery into AWS or wherever is appropriate.
Awesome. Thank you, Bill. There is a follow-on question to this, which is, are the backups deduplicated on-prem before being stored in S3?
So what we do is we do incremental forever, and we do compression, and then we transmit to S3. We do not deduplicate across objects in S3 today, and the reason being for that is that you pay a penalty if you do global dedupe and then have to rehydrate on recovery. And so what we've opted for is we've opted for incremental forever and compression, which gets you sort of a rudimentary dedupe within the object prior to archiving to S3. And we've opted not to do global deduplication across objects today because it allows us to recover as rapidly as possible out of the archive in a failure scenario.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, there's a question on reporting. So does Rubrik provide built-in reports where customers can track, if they're able to meet the SLAs that they have in place for their protection jobs? Typical use case for this being, to satisfy any sort of compliance requirements that they could have in place.
Yes, we do. And if you're in a hybrid architecture, those reports would be driven out of Polaris. If you're solely in, say, data center and archive to AWS mode, then those reports are also available on the cluster itself. And then both platforms have open APIs that you can consume. So you've got Open API on the cluster as well as GraphQL, and then you've got GraphQL on Polaris. And so in addition to the canned reports and the custom reports that you can generate, download, and email through the user interface, you've also got the ability to interact programmatically with either solution to generate those reports and utilize the data in them, as well as the ability to call our API to extract whatever other metrics you may want to extract that might not be available directly in the reporting engine. So there are canned reports for SLA compliance. It sounds like the question was specifically related to SLA compliance and sort of validation. There's definitely SLA compliance reports canned. If there are not canned reports, then I've yet to run into a scenario where we can't extract the desired data out of the product in some way, shape, or form through the API.
Got it. Thank you, Bill. All right, so we have time for one last question. And that question is, so does Rubrik support the various S3 tiers and lifecycle tiering?
Yes, so today what we support is we support S3, we support S3IA, we support the one zone storage classes, and we support Glacier. We support lifecycle down from S3 into S3IA using lifecycle policies on the AWS side of the house. And we are actually working towards some intelligent lifecycle and tiering capabilities down into Glacier and Glacier Deep Archive. But today, we support lifecycle from S3 to S3IA.
Awesome. Thank you, Bill. All right. So with that being said, I want to leave you with a couple of links that you can use to learn more about our products. You can use the first link to learn about AWS storage solutions. The second one to learn more about Rubrik solutions on AWS. And finally, if you already haven't, you can go to the last link to sign up for a free trial of AWS services. You can register for an account at this link, and you get to try out certain AWS services free for a period of 12 months. With that, I would like to thank you all for attending today's webinar. Please remember to stay connected and complete the brief survey at the conclusion of this webinar. We look forward to supporting